It's maybe the single greatest horror film of all time. While I realise it's a bold opener to refer to anything as the best of all time, when it comes to horror movies, John Carpenter's The Thing is undeniably in the conversation. A nail-biting dive into a world of tense paranoia, isolation and distrust made by one of the all-time masters of horror. A practical effects showcase that demonstrated revolutionary levels of work in that field that to this day, over 40 years later, it's still unmatched in ambition, scope, and execution. A cosmic horror classic in which every single element works, from its synthy creeping soundtracks by Ennio Morricone, its tension-inducing screenplay by Bill Lancaster, its iconic creature design and effects by Rob Bottin, its cold and unforgiving setting of the Antarctic, and its powerhouse performances from its iconic cast. It is, in every sense of the word, a masterpiece, and it almost ruined its creator's career. Adapted from the 1938 novella Who Goes There, which had previously been adapted in a less faithful effort back in 1951 by Howard Hawks in The Thing from Another World, John Carpenter's The Thing follows an isolated group of men in an American research facility in the Antarctic, who, during their time there, find themselves coming into contact with a shape-shifting killer alien capable of perfectly imitating each of them among other forms, creating an environment of suspicion and distrust as each of the researchers become unaware of who can be trusted and who could be the alien imposter. Yes, before anyone comments, just like Among Us. The film is now recognised for what it is, and that is one of not only the best science fiction and horror films of all time, but one of the best movies, period. But when it first released, totally different story. People hated this movie. They absolutely destroyed it in reviews. It was called junk. It was called wretched. It was called the quintessential moron movie. The practical effects, that it is now almost unanimously agreed are the best practical effects ever to be put to screen, were deemed by many to be undermining to the plot and called excessive and repulsive, with one review calling them more disgusting than frightening and lamenting the increasing use of visceral gore within movies of the time period. The amount of pull quotes you can find just absolutely burying The Thing are innumerable. It was the most unloved monster movie in history. It was atrocity for atrocity's sake. It was Carpenter's most unsatisfying film to date. The way people spoke of this film, you'd think it was some D-grade exploitation torture porn flick with no artistic merit, with lines like, "If you want blood, go to the slaughterhouse." I need you to understand this wasn't just a handful of people with very strong opinions, but that The Thing was genuinely in the discussion for the most hated movie of all time within the cultural consensus around then, which is absolutely baffling to think about now. I remember the first time I saw The Thing was at my local cinema's Halloween cult all-nighter around 1 or 2 in the morning, and of all the movies I watched for the first time that night, it was the one I was in the most awe of. I genuinely couldn't believe it when later looking into the film that it had such an icy initial reception. But it did, and the effect on John Carpenter's career was instantaneous. Obviously, Carpenter has looped back around to being a celebrated figure in cinema again, but it's interesting to think how much more successful he could have been and how different his career might have looked without this backlash, because the consequences of it were immediate for the poor dude. There are a lot of Carpenter movies we never got because of the hate this film got. Straight away, Carpenter lost his job directing Firestarter, and regardless of all of the celebrated efforts he made prior, people seem to literally just forget that this was the dude who also made Halloween, as the multi-film contract he scored at Universal was actually bought out by the studio, with them deciding they would rather pay him to do nothing than have anything more from him. Carpenter took the failure very personally, and although he kept making movies, the experience allegedly cost him a significant amount of confidence, and it would take Carpenter a few years before he'd talk about the fallout. First opening up to Starlog magazine in 1985, 3 years later. Ironically, that had been one of the publications whose reviewer had been particularly cruel to the feature, saying, "The thing smells," and adding that it has no pace, sloppy continuity, zero humour, bland characters on top of being totally devoid of either warmth or humanity. Jesus, tell us how you really feel. In his interview, Carpenter said, "I was called a pornographer of violence. I had no idea it would be received that way. The thing was just too strong for that time. I knew it was going to be strong, but I didn't think it would be too strong." And man, that's underselling it. Going through these reviews now, I find them pretty baffling reads. I'm not one to knock the out-of-touch critics and use the title as some kind of catch-all term for reviews I disagree with. I haven't found any write-up on the film from the time that feels disingenuous. But having said that, it really does feel that they're watching a totally different movie to the thing that I saw. So let's look at what it's all about. Antarctica. Winter, 1982. The film opens with an ominous score over the image of a Norwegian helicopter chasing an Alaskan Malamute through the endless snow. The men in the helicopter try to shoot at the dog, but it escapes into an American research station occupied by the following 12 men. The radio operator Windows, biologist Blair and assistant biologist Fuchs, meteorologist Bennings, the station doctor Copper, mechanic and helicopter pilot trainee Palmer, another mechanic named Childs, the cook Knowles, geologist Norris, the dog handler Clark, station commander Gary, and our main helicopter pilot RJ McCready, who often just gets called Mac. Some of the Americans stationed there try to figure out what's going on, but amongst the chaos and confusion, the helicopter is accidentally blown up by a grenade. The pilot survives as the dog runs over to the group. He screams at them something in Norwegian that they don't understand, and raises his gun, presumably to shoot the dog, but misses and hits the leg of Bennett, causing further panic until station commander Gary shoots him in defense of his team. With no idea what the hell just happened, Copper and Mac head out to look into the Norwegian base, to see if they can find any logic as to why two of their researchers just came and shot at their group. Upon arrival, they find it wrecked and destroyed, its staff missing, and a corpse in one of the rooms that appears to have two faces. It also looks like maybe the Norwegians had managed to pull something out of the ice. The two return to their base with the strange corpse in tow, hopeful it might provide some answers as to what the hell is going on. But when Blair performs an autopsy on the corpse, the only thing he can identify about it is that it appears to internally consist of normal human organs. There's also the small matter of this good boy still kicking about the place. They kennel this gorgeous lad, portrayed by a dog actor called Jed, and this was his first role. What a good boy! Landing a role in one of the best horror films ever. Good boy, right out of the park. But it turns out when the dog is left alone, he is in fact not a gorgeous good boy, but a very ugly bad one, as he transforms into a writhing mass of flesh-splitting, pulpy viscera, rapidly flapping thing tentacles and horrific spider-like gore-soaked legs, and then attacks the other dogs. The loud chaos brings the station staff running, and they all see the hideous thing for the first time, or one form of it anyway. The beauty of the thing as a creature is that its entire modus operandi is assimilation and mimicry. It's constantly switching and transforming into different imitations of life to blend in with its surroundings. Its true form, if it even has one, seemingly existing somewhere in the goopy mass of nondescript biological matter between transitions. And this is a problem for the men at the station who find out about this concerning issue after burning the creature and perform an autopsy on its charred remains. And what's worse, if even a single microbe of it survives, then that little germ of existence has the capacity to infect and assimilate whatever life it manages to get its hands on. And this creates a huge problem for the station crew. Although they do burn the pseudo-dog-like mass of goop before them, the thing in its far cuter good boy form was earlier seen wandering into a room with one of the men we didn't find out the identity of, meaning any one of the group could be infected. And on top of that, the strange corpse they brought back from the Norwegian base seems to have a little bit of life left in it. Blair runs a simulation to determine just how dangerous this thing could be, and comes to the harrowing discovery that if it could reach civilization, it has the potential to infect the entire world. Terrified by this discovery, he sabotages the group's helicopters, destroys their radio room, and murders the remaining dogs to try and minimize the possibility of the thing spreading until the others are able to get him under control and lock him away. Though sort of a noble thing to do in a way, that doesn't change the fact that it leaves everyone stranded in this freezing hellhole with the potential of a killer alien lurking amongst them and nothing to do but grow increasingly paranoid of one another, especially after they witness the effects of the creature on their humanity firsthand when Bennett is caught being assimilated and has to be chased down, which gives us this strikingly harrowing image that really sets up what's at stake as the remaining men stand around his half-transformed body and are forced to burn him alive. It's in this deeply bleak tone and its growing sense of paranoia that the film just truly excels. The whole movie cultivates so much distrust between its cast that this suspicion and wariness essentially becomes the second antagonist of the film. Throughout its runtime, the community of the outpost, who are initially depicted as being friendly, as illustrated here in this pretty cozy looking game of ping pong, have their entire dynamic thrown upside down and into disrepair. And before you know it, they're screaming at one another, tying each other to chairs, and even attacking and killing each other. What the film is really clever at doing though, is making the audience part of the paranoia. Dramatic irony, the narrative device where an audience will have information that the characters don't, is often employed throughout films to create a sense of tension and suspense. There's the famous example Hitchcock used to always use of showing a bomb under a table where two people are having a conversation who do not know that it's there, and tension is built from that knowledge, making the audience sit and wait of that bomb going off. The Thing, however, approaches its tension in quite the opposite way. Both the viewer and the characters know about the bomb in this example being the Thing. However, we're as in the dark on the nature of the bomb as they are. Apart from maybe Mac as we follow him through most of the film, any one of the others could be the Thing, and we're just as paranoid and distrusting as the characters in the situation. The film purposefully keeps everything ambiguous, even right through to the ending. We never see which of the crew the dog made a little visit to in the earlier scene. When characters go off screen and return later, we don't know what could have happened to them in the moments they are away. Everyone is a suspect, anyone could be infected, and when those infected do reveal themselves, it often occurs in truly shocking ways. The film constantly finds ways to surprise you and keep you on edge, combining all of its greatest strengths, its uncertain atmosphere, its chilling Arctic setting, its constant ambiguity, and its glorious practical effects to create iconic scenes that aren't just great jump out of your seat moments, but also further embellish on the claustrophobic tension, bleak atmosphere, and the terrifying implications of its monster. Just when you think someone is safe because they died of a heart attack, the dude's chest will open up and bite off the arms of the man trying to resuscitate him. And when a moment like this happens, something that you just could not have seen coming in a million years, you realise how truly unpredictable this creature really is. How do they fight something they can never be sure what it's capable of? How will it attack them next? How will it escape? The varied practical effects aren't just a neat image. The way Botten never repeats a visual in all of the effects work cements the kind of cosmic level horror of a monster that cannot be pinned down and understood. One minute, it's this tentacled dog. The next, it's a human head scurrying on these horrible spider legs that emerge from it. It will tear you apart in ways you didn't even know it could, grabbing you with tentacles you never knew it had, opening a head into jaws you never knew could be there. There is nothing like the alien of the Thing. Not just because it's an unmatched level of craft and imagination, but also because it kind of is nothing. But it's also everything. Carpenter said one of his goals with the movie was to not have the monster just be a man in a suit, saying that he used to love and watch sci-fi and horror movies when he was younger, but when the big scary thing would surface, it was always a man in a suit. So Dude and his team could not have done better at achieving this goal. This creature isn't just not a man in a suit, it's a monster that often makes a man into a suit, And that's way more terrifying. It's interesting going back to those old reviews now after rewatching the film and finding so much to celebrate in the elements that so many at the time considered weaknesses of the movie. One criticism levelled at the film from a reviewer in the Washington Post I pulled from the Internet Archive was that the lack of constant and coherent fixed form for its monster was to the film's detriment, with the reviewer writing, "This chameleon-like form of menace restores a feature from the 1938 pulp story Who Goes There that had been changed in the 1952 version of the thing. It's not necessarily a restoration for the better in a melodramatic sense, because the shapeshifter appears to hide within host bodies in an arbitrary fashion that suits the convenience of the filmmakers but fails to reveal a suspenseful pattern. The finite Hulk impersonated by James Arness 30 years ago wasn't nearly as slimy or as versatile as Botton's mechanical abomination, but he was an easier threat to keep in focus. But in my mind, the fact that you can't keep track of the thing and it is not easy to follow lends itself wholly to the uncertainty the film so actively works at cultivating. Similarly, the lack of camaraderie in the movie was a common criticism. Why, after all, did the men of the film not team up against the thing? Surely a united effort would have seen a higher survival rate. To which I would say, is that not the entire point in the movie? Yeah, these men could have all united and probably had a better go of things, but basically, the entire central thesis of the film is that it is their distrust and individualism that kills them, not the monster. The monster may cause the final blows, but it is only through their paranoia and attempts at self-preservation at the expense of the greater community it is often able to do that. So why is it that this masterpiece got such a bad initial rap? Well, there's a lot of things going against it, but one of the biggest things was, this was the 80s, a decade whose biggest cinematic hits were built on brilliant escapism. Back to the Future, Indiana Jones, Batman, Ghostbusters. The thing was coming out in an era where escapism dominated, and it also came out against the backdrop of a financial recession and released during a period of the Cold War that saw a sharp increase in hostility between the US and the Soviet Union. A period defined by paranoia and distrust, of stories of your friendly neighbours turning out to be a Russian spy. And this was the social anxiety that the thing very much tapped into, mirrored and commented on, though perhaps a little too well for audiences of the time who wanted an escape from those fears, not a cynical and sinister exploration of them. The lack of traditional heroism in the film became a concern too, in a decade where slow-burning, oppressive stories like Alien would later be revisited and turned into slickly produced action sci-fi war epics filled with big heroic moments for its protagonists to great success. The far more subdued and less celebratory heroisms of Kurt Russell as Mac reluctantly taking the leader mantle, accepting his fate that he and the remaining survivors are doomed to freeze to death, but trying to fight the thing anyway to stop its spread, only to be given an ambiguous ending where we can't even be sure if that slightly less worse scenario of them all dying but at least not spreading the creature had been achieved, was just not what audiences and critics were looking for then, despite again it being some of the film's best qualities. The movie was also going against stiff competition in AT, which was very much the polar opposite of its nihilistic tone, and with its R rating and bad reviews against that family-friendly juggernaut, it never stood a chance. Or, at least it didn't at the time. However, much like its titular Alien, it seems to have found a way to survive. As time went on and audiences became more willing to accept some of the bolder choices of the movie and revisit the film on its home video releases, it slowly developed a cult following, who saw past the surface level complaints of why no romance, why no fun, why good guys no win, and saw it for the rich and complex examination of the depths of human paranoia and how distrust can tear us all apart that it was. This cult audience slowly developed into just an audience, No cult descriptor necessary. And eventually, as more and more people re-examined the movie for what it was, saw the nail-biting tension of its blood testing scene, found the dark, morbid humour that many at the time had said it was completely devoid of, found the depth in its characters that had once been written off as shallow, The Thing finally became recognised as a truly iconic, important and ahead of its time piece of cinema. So powerful are the themes of this movie that over 4 decades later, the ambiguous ending is still a hotly debated topic. Is the Thing dead? Is Childs infected? Are we ever really safe from this threat? 40 years on, and much like the characters in the movie, we still argue and we still don't know who we can trust. And if that isn't just the perfect legacy that flawlessly captures the very ideas this film was communicating and built upon, then I don't know what is. And on that note, that is yet another episode of Wholesome Halloween 3 in the bag. But before you go, let me really quickly go over this month's announcement. Firstly, in non-trans Lifeline charity efforts, I might still be in a competition called Face of Horror, link in the description. And if I still am at this point, that means I'm really far along and would super appreciate votes. You get a free one every day and you can pay for more if you're so inclined, and doing so will support the B+ Foundation, which fight childhood cancer. Secondly, I've bragged about it enough. I'm now a creative advisor on a major horror documentary franchise and it's running a campaign for a new film this month, and I can get you a discount on that. Link in the description, use it for a 10% discount. Check it out. And in this month's Trans Lifeline charity efforts, once again, everything I make from Wholesome Halloween 3 this October is going straight to their charity, and you can help by either donating using the buttons on this page or by ordering a charity t-shirt. This is a mock-up design, the illustration is final, but the final print will be a big batch order with a larger scale screen print on high quality vegan shirts that's getting put in at the end of the month. And if you want to get in on that print, get your order in now. They're only available this month, and every penny of profit from them will be donated directly to Trans Lifeline. Link in the description if you want to pick that up. Other than that, I've been Dan Drambles, you're watching Wholesome Halloween 3, a celebration of horror, and just like I'll say almost every other day this month, I will see you again tomorrow.